This is, in fact, the fourth of a series this year that we're having on these various topics on a monthly basis that primarily deal with the climate crisis and its related effects like drought and fire and heat and urban heat, which we've had a very successful series this year, including one on not just urban heat, but we had one on climate politics as well. So we're happy to draw on some of our own resources within the LA Community College District, faculty and staff that work around this issue. It also represents for us a new, in a sense, a departure from what we did last year, where we really stayed within the environmental science, climatology framework. And this year we've made an effort to break out of the STEM silo, as it's called, and look at issues like psychology and politics and things that we might not ourselves teach, but which we're keen to feature as part of the Sustainable Environment Institute. So with that, I have a series of slides, and I do need to say that we are, in fact, recording the event and where it will be seen. So our panel today includes Dr. Bhutia. She's Director of Life Skills Center and Clinical Training Internship Program. She's also a licensed clinical psychologist and meditation teacher at Los Angeles Harbor College. We're also happy to have Eugenie, who's a licensed clinical social worker. She's worked with the Climate Reality Project Los Angeles and the LA Unified School District Climate Curriculum Committee, which has a major success recently with Al Gore making a video clip congratulating the LAUSD for the advances they're making in climate curriculum. We're very happy to have Bilal, who is now a student at West LA College, but has actually been active on climate issues, as you will find out today, since he was 15. So he's part of the Youth Climate Strike Los Angeles, and we're very happy to have a student on this panel today. Houry Tanashian is the Resources for Student Health at Los Angeles Pierce College, and Elmida Baghdaserians is actually a professor of child development at Los Angeles Valley College. Let's see if I can go back through these correctly. Here is the flyer that you're familiar with for today. Thank you, Beth. I think she did a very beautiful flyer here. This is a way of introducing the issue today.
How do you define climate anxiety? The understanding that things are changing really rapidly around me right now, and I don't necessarily have full control over what happens to me or what my future looks like.
In June of 2021, Layla suffered from a severe heat rash.
I went outside for a 5-minute break in between, and I started experiencing extreme pinpricks of pain across my chest. I started feeling really exhausted. I was on the verge of a panic attack because I'd never experienced anything like that before.
Today, Layla is one of thousands of young people around the country taking on climate change and fighting back against the adults in power, who they say knowingly polluted the earth.
21 young people ages 11 to 22 are suing the federal government over policies they say are destroying their world.
Lawsuits have been filed around the world from plaintiffs as young as 8 years old. And while many of them get tossed, for the first time in history, a youth-led climate change lawsuit is going to trial.
What we are doing to children is beyond the imagination, I think, of most people. And I probably would not know myself, except that I have sat in a room and I have listened to them. The kids need to see that people in power, particularly people in government, are taking their role to protect them seriously.
And Julie joins me live now from Capitol Hill. So Julie, let's talk more about this. Why is this generation especially vulnerable to the consequences of climate change?
Allison, the answer to that is twofold. In my conversations with these young adults, they told me that, first of all, the effects of climate change, natural disasters, excessive heat, wildfires, they're just extremely prevalent in these young kids' lives, no matter where they live in this country or around the world. And second of all, they really feel like those adults in charge have largely abandoned them because they say they abandoned this issue. The lawsuits that I was talking about in the piece, the lawsuits that were filed child by kids as young as 8. They really think, and they say that the governments, the state governments, the United States, violated their constitutional rights of liberty and security by knowingly polluting what they say is their backyard. And so I spoke to one woman, Holly. She's a 19-year-old in Florida. She said that her whole life, her parents were putting pressure on her, telling her that her generation is responsible to solve this problem. And there's a real problem now with mental health and climate anxiety, as you heard from the doctor that I spoke to in the piece.
Indeed, no pressure there. You can see that there is a very important generational difference here. And I think maybe some of that was brought home by the election on Tuesday, where young people came out in far larger numbers than was anticipated, and where some are even saying Gen Z, made the significant difference in the outcomes. Is climate anxiety a normal response to an abnormal situation? That is different than the way we normally frame issues within psychology and even the practice of psychotherapy, where usually the focus is on the individual to a greater extent than the context, the social or political context in which people function, thrive, or don't thrive. But there is a big change there, and that's why we're glad to have this panel today. I think most of the practicing professionals we have on the panel today recognize this. One person who was mentioned in the audio clip that for some reason is not audioing is Lucy Garcia, who we had on Earth Day. She's from the Climate Reality Project and also the curriculum committee at LAUSD. So it's something that LAUSD is actually has their own chapter in or subchapter, and it's for climate literacy. Now, there are obviously some challenges that have to be met or trying to be met by our institutions and our professionals in charge of psychology. For example, the fact that in some parts of the state, it's very difficult for students to avail themselves of the services that might be available because it's an overwhelming demand that too many institutions are not yet either equipped with or staffed with or budgeted for to meet that demand. So in some cases, students not only feel overwhelmed, but they also feel they have to wait a long time to obtain those services. So one of the things we're going to do today when we hit the ground running is to detail to people attending this event to what extent we do, in fact, are working very hard for campuses to meet the therapy needs of students throughout. This was provided for us, I think, by Dr. Bhutia or possibly by Eugenie. It's from higher ed, and it's looking at different ways of integrating psychology and physical well-being, and even you could say social activism into something more holistic, more complete around the individual's needs, and not the silo of, you're suffering from anxiety, here's the medication.
In a recent PBS NewsHour survey in partnership with the Generation Lab, children and young adults said they expect climate change to have major implications for how they live. Nearly 2/3 said climate change will influence where they decide to live. More than half said it will change how and where they travel. And 1/3 said it would affect their decision to have children. That's on top of growing research that shows young people are increasingly experiencing what's now known as climate anxiety. Our William Brangham has this report about young people's lives and how they see their future.
These young protesters in downtown San Francisco are frustrated by what they see as inaction on climate change. They're also here because they're worried about their own futures.
It's clear that we have passed certain tipping points already that have convinced children that they are in trouble, that their futures are imperiled.
Lisa Van Susteren is a member of the Climate Psychiatry Alliance that's training more therapists to recognize and treat this growing anxiety.
Kids have told me that they don't want to pursue a secondary education. What's the point? Kids have said, of course, that they don't want to have children because they don't want to bring a child into the chaos. And then there are other kids who just become anxious by themselves and might take all sorts of responses, maybe, eating disorders, some people, or just a general feeling of apathy.
Do you share any of the concern that some critics share that we're overly scaring children, that the entire youth climate movement is stirring up fears that are terrifying kids inappropriately?
That is a common reaction among some people who do not want to face the reality. The kids are not dreaming this up. They aren't living in a cave. They have seen with their own eyes, no longer just scientists telling them, they have seen what is happening. And for us to sweep this under the rug makes them feel even worse.
Even as young people try to prepare for this changing future, many, like Sophia Palau, are using their fears to fuel climate activism.
I march, I protest, I take action. And that's the only thing that really calms me down, is knowing that I'm doing all that I can to stop climate change. But even if I'm just doing this or my friends are doing this, it still might not be enough for the giant changes around the world that we need.
Those changes have to be made by older generations who, she says, hold young people's fate in their hands.
Indeed. Quite different from the view that the young woman got, where her parents told her that it was their generation that has to fix it. There's another side to this which we want to touch on today, and I think it's very important. And that is that Gen Z, that is the youngest generation that's coming up through K through 12 and through community colleges and universities, it has a much more focused view of their own education and what they want out of it, I think, than previous generations. So in this case, this is an article that came out in the Guardian some time ago, where they interviewed and polled first-year students, second-year students about which majors they were choosing. The overwhelming comment was environmental education, environmental science, environmental studies. What else is there? And it's something that resonated with me because I made that exact leap when I was 21 years old, going to UC Santa Barbara. The other thing is, of course, the doom and gloom views, and some very responsible and even respected people like Vaclav Smil have been accused of contributing to this in his latest book on "This is the Real World," and the real world is we're married to fossil fuels and there's nothing you can do about it. So with that kind of look, it's no wonder that young people really need to and want to reject this, what they call the doomers, which does sadly rhyme with boomers. So okay, doomer is a pun on that phrase, and this particular young woman is actually taking great joy in realizing that her activism is perhaps the most relevant activism in many, many, many generations. What young people do today has far more reaching effects and is far more moored in the reality of what we're confronting than my generation was when we were busy studying comparative literature. I don't mean to put down comparative literature, but there is a need for realism in our education and in our goals, and for that matter, to channel that energy into something that is forward-looking, even optimistic, as that one young woman said, even joyful. This came out from the Bay Area KQED, and it looked at that same phenomenon. This is from the New Republic. These are all posted, by the way, on our website. You can see them on the homepage. There's a list of articles that were curated for this event, and all the ones you're seeing that I'm showing you now are actually there. So you're free to download them and use them in whatever settings you want. But there is a certain it's not the word pleasure would be wrong. There's a certain sense of purpose and completeness for people that are using activism around climate and environment to deal with the fact that they are indeed very anxious. So with that, we want to introduce our panel. I will stop my share and we'll turn to first, actually, our colleague, Elmida Baghdaserians, is here for a short while today. So we'll let her introduce herself first. And let me close this little window here, and let's see. Elmida Baghdaserians is voila. Thank you, whoever rescued me there. Doing the keyboard at the same time. Hello, and Elmida, thank you so much for being part of today's panel. As you know, we came up with some questions that were awfully huge, and thanks to my colleague Beth yesterday, we went through them and came up with questions that would be more properly suited. These were the questions that we want to put at the beginning that are very short, like 3 minutes. So I guess our first question would be, how do students avail themselves of what is offered on our campuses? What faculty or what tools are there for faculty and staff? And very importantly, what tools are there for students?
Definitely. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much for having me on this panel this morning. George, thank you so much for the introduction of this event. I would like to begin by saying, as faculty, of course, we have many major responsibilities for our students, and there are several points that I want to make sure that I touch on, and I know our time is limited. So I want to begin by saying, as a faculty member, it is my responsibility to make sure that my students feel safe, empowered, and connected. And how does one do that, right? So the question is, how do I make sure that my students are feeling safe, empowered, and connected? Because as a faculty member, I'm not only responsible for the content that I teach in my courses, but also to look at the student as a whole, right? So student-centered education is one that takes a look at what's happening in the community and society, in the world. And so I'm teaching from the lens of a change agent. And as a faculty member, I feel it's my responsibility to help my students learn how to get the information they need so that they can feel like they are empowered, and of course, through that, feel the safety and connectedness to their campuses, to their communities, and so forth. So I would like to begin by saying that there's never a simple way, right? But as a faculty member, I know I've practiced this and this works really well. And I just want to share that with my dear colleagues here this morning. Get to know your students, because the more you know about their struggles and how they see the lenses that they see the world through, the more effective you can be as a faculty member. Take an active role in your students' well-being. Make sure that you're sharing resources with them, not just once, not just twice, not just 3 times, as many times as you feel is necessary throughout the semester. I know one of the things that I like to do is I like to send weekly reminders to my students about resources that are available for them for free on our campus. So make sure you're reaching them in many ways. Of course, having information on the syllabus is very helpful, but I feel that those weekly reminders are even more powerful. So taking an active role in your students' well-being. Quick example, at Valley College, one of the things that we try to do is make sure that all of our students, and of course this is district-wide, know that they can get 10 sessions of free counseling every semester, psychological services. That's very expensive. Not all of our students have insurance. So this is really helpful. Let them know, send those reminders, let them know where they can go, who they can call, how to contact these services. Number 3, show empathy and flexibility. During a very I want to say troubling times, right, that our students have experienced. Faculty responsiveness and flexibility has made a huge difference for our students. And some of those articles that were shared earlier, they're listed in there as well. Number 4, include wellness resources. Let them know where they can go on your campus to get the support that is necessary. Number 5, strive for equity, right? Because we know that not all of our students come to our classes with the same amount of resources available to them. So do everything you can as a faculty member to make sure that there's equity in your class. 2 more points. Number 6, professional development for faculty. Participate in as many events as you can that focus on student support, because as faculty, that's what our job is, right? Not just the content, but the care that we give to our students. And lastly, make time for self-care, because it can be draining as a faculty member, as a staff member on a college campus, because we're always giving, because that's our job, right? And more than our job, it's probably just because it's also our passion. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can be your best self and give more to our students. Is that helpful, George?
That's very helpful. I mean, very helpful. It was exactly what we were hoping from your professional perspective. What are sort of distilled down to some good points. If particularly those of us who are faculty and have students in the classroom, to be alert to, and to not just put it in the syllabus at the beginning of the semester and ignore it. So that's very appreciated, and it's good to know that this is something happening district-wide given the demand. So I'm wondering, since we have you here, I know that you weren't here for a while, but what would you say is the easiest way, or I want to say the way to finesse approaching a student who you detect or perceive is actually quite distressed for reasons that you might, as an instructor, not know?
Absolutely. I think checking in with students when you see that a student hasn't been participating in your class, whether you're teaching online or face-to-face on campus, it's important to have regular communication. Sometimes that one email that comes from the instructor can make or break a student's college experience and even life experience, right? Sometimes when I reach out to my students who haven't been active in the class, I'll get information that is kind of surprising, and they didn't take that step to let me know, but now they have an opportunity to share. I'll reach out and I'll say, just checking in, want to make sure everything is okay. I noticed you missed two big assignments that we had last week. Is everything okay? And sometimes students will open up. They'll say, I had death in my family, or I had to get another job because other family members lost their jobs. And so it's important for us to be in tune and always paying attention to these red flags, because as faculty, you can say to them, that's really tough. Thank you so much for sharing with me. I want to help you. When I email a student and I tell them I care about you and I want to help you, they want it. They want the help, right? So they stay engaged, right, and they know that there's someone out there that actually cares about them. And so I can't tell you how many times I've experienced this over the past 3 years, especially since COVID, where students have been in stressful situations and didn't really think to email and let us know, or let me know as the faculty member. But because I reached out, now they're willing to share. Yes. Always saying, I'm here for you. I care about you. I want to help you. Simple, but it works.
It does work. Well, that's a very good point, because of course a lot of us have been teaching remotely for the last 2.5 years, and it has its positive side. I found out I had very nice conversations with students thanks to Zoom, because there was no one else in the room. So I had like a Zoom office hour, and I think we were able to talk more, frankly and comfortably than if we'd been in the classroom. But maybe that's the silver lining on the fact that Zoom is very alienating. As one of my students told me, I wanted to go to college, not to Zoom. Well, thank you, Elmida. That is very, very useful. I want to now introduce Eugenie Lewis, who is our point person today, who is a licensed social worker and a practicing psychologist, and who can really shed light on what is happening in the K-12 system, as well as climate curriculum. So Eugenie, go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know what you are doing with the LAUSD.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Just give me one moment. And so good morning, everyone. I'm Eugenie Lewis. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I am a therapist, and I'm a college counselor and a career counselor. And I come to this space, and I really appreciate all the introduction. and it may be from a little different generational perspective of telling my climate story, which, I see this as and I guess you could say an older person who came of age during the Earth Day of 1970 and was involved in climate activism at that age, and kind of took a long hiatus from that. And then just last year, participated in the Climate Reality Project training and became, in this last year, a climate activist. But I'm a mental health professional. I'm very concerned about youth. I have a practice. I'm also on the Department of Mental Health Youth Committee, and I'm going to be working in a youth center. I have clients that are young people, and I'm very concerned. I guess one of the things I want to say about the generation is that from my standpoint, I see my concern is wanting to have a great future for young people. And I have two, I guess you could say 20-year-old in the range of 20s, young people in my own family, and they have shared with me their distress about the climate crisis. And that startled me and really made me want to get involved. And now I feel at this stage of my life that I want to do whatever I can to help young people see a hopeful future. I want them to have great careers. And so I want to look at this from every angle. So here are some dimensions, and I'll just briefly introduce them, of looking at what the hope gap is in terms of climate issues, what is ecological distress, and how we can cultivate hope and visualize the future and take action. Just to start off, what is the hope gap? I mean, this is the difference between what we're concerned about the climate situation, but we don't always know what to do about it. And that is one gap. And then the other gap is that a lot of times we need to have some hope that the future will look well for us to work on it. And so I think these are the gaps that we need to kind of fill in how we help and look at climate issues. I just want to briefly outline, and some of this was covered nicely in the introduction, but what eco-anxiety is. I mean, basically, I would just briefly say it's a fear about the future. And for some people, it's the present. There are people that have experienced stressful events, with disasters, fires, various events. But eco-anxiety is really like, what is the future going to look like? Is it going to be a good future? And then there's grief, which, we think about grief meaning loss of people in our lives, but it's also the loss of land, the loss of animals, the loss of our home, what it looked like when we were growing up. Some communities, Native communities, have lost their whole environment, and that's something called solastalgia. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Anyway, one thing I was noticing about grief is there's a disenfranchised grief, and that's when it's not acknowledged. And I think that's where a lot of what I feel happens right now is that a lot of us are going around being very concerned about the climate, but yet there's sort of a lack of acknowledgement of it. So that's disenfranchised grief. Whether we feel guilty if we're not doing enough, there's trauma from actual events that have occurred, and there's burnout from, some people that are really, really involved in the climate movement, and, others that aren't, really involved. And I think we want to kind of spread that around so that there are more people involved. I'm just going to run through this real quickly because I know there's an introduction, but there's kind of the ups and downs of climate emotions that I've noticed with my own experience, kind of a lost innocence, maybe like feeling fatal, but then later on getting involved with the climate community and that helping to have, be engaged and feel more hopeful. There's activism that's internal, of the work we need to do within ourselves, and then there's external activism. And I think this book, Active Hope, talks about how we can take our hope and be not only, just think about what, be hopeful, but actually do things. And I think we need to visualize the future. We need to see what it would look like so that we can work toward it. I'm inspired by things like Project Drawdown and Regeneration. There's a lot of different projects and people that I think are helpful to look toward. And I think we can find joy in the climate crisis. And there's some activities that we can do to do that, like what we're good at, what we like to do. There's so much that needs to be done. So, and I have some resources, which I'll put in the chat, both for taking care of ourselves as well as mental health resources. And maybe with that, I just say that I'd be happy to stay in touch.
Thank you, Eugenie. That was very, very helpful. Some very useful slides there, and I can see, why we were so happy to invite you, because I knew from knowing you from our LAUSD climate curriculum group that your practice involves guiding people toward those things that will bring them a sense of wholeness, of relevance, of proper response, even if there is a loss of innocence. I think that was a very important thing that you pointed out that I think is very true of young people today, Gen Z, who have, in a sense, had all of the innocence of childhood reduced by the overwhelming tsunami of or they say it being bombarded. I'm wondering if any of my other colleagues have questions, but I want to actually also introduce Sim Bilal, who, thanks to Eugenie, we were able to contact Sim Bilal, who's now a student at our West LA College and is an activist. I actually showed you at one point when I was sharing the screen here, this article from the LA Times, and Sim is in this article. It's right at the beginning. When he was 6 years old, Sim Bilal began to have nightmares of floods pouring through his South LA home. He became an activist at the age of 15. So welcome, Sim Bilal, to our panel today, and we'll keep Eugenie here as well, since it's thanks to both of you. I think that let me make you add you a spotlight there. Voila. Feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself as to, well, you have actually quite some traction in activism since you were very young. So share with us how that happened, because it isn't something we associate with, people in the age groups of 5 to 15.
Yeah, how's it going, everyone? My name is Sim Bilal. I'm a student, activist, climate activist. I think I, first got introduced to the movement. My grandma, she's a boomer, of course, and she in her youth was very active with, civil rights movement and stuff like that. And so growing up, she's also an Indigenous woman. So, she had ties with the American Indian movement and Black Panthers. And so, growing up, I learned a lot about just like, not only like my connection to the land and my responsibility to, help steward it, but also I learned about, activism. And I think all that was sort of like playing in the back of my mind, growing up. I used to ask her to tell me stories about, her youth and days back then. And when I was about five or maybe like 4 years old, I watched The Inconvenient Truth by accident. I kind of like snuck in. My parents were watching it. I watched it, and it traumatized me. And so from the ages about like 5 till about 10 years old, I used to have like very vivid nightmares of my bedroom flooding, because, when you're a kid, you can understand things, but sometimes you don't have like the best like gauge of like either time or just how circumstances work. And so, right around the time I'm like 4 to 6 years old, I lost my other grandma to environmental pollution and just racism and because of cancer. And so, I have all these things playing in my mind, and it sort of traumatized me. And I think, back then, no one was talking about climate anxiety. It wasn't a thing. And so for me at 5 years old, to have just like very, like, it's clearly climate anxiety, if you look back, but, no one had the language to describe that. And so I was like, it traumatized me. And for a long time, I felt very disempowered because I'm just a little kid and I'm growing up. And, right around the time I'm like 13 to 14, 15, I was getting more more involved with activism. I joined Earth Guardians, which was one of the groups representing the youth plaintiffs that were suing the United States government for causing a climate crisis. And so, that played a really critical role in just like my growth as a climate activist, just watching these other kids, feel the same way I did, I guess.
Well, that's a really rich biography for someone so young, and I guess you did in fact get started early, but also to credit your parents who had obviously had an influence on you and have helped you shape your perspective and your optic on how to deal with environmental problems. I'm also happy to see that Lucy Garcia is here in attendance. She's not one of our panelists today. We did have her on Earth Day, but she is the Climate Reality Project person from LAUSD climate curriculum, and was in the on Monday. KCRW FM had in the show that's called Greater LA, hosted by Steve Chiatekis. They dealt with climate anxiety for about 15 minutes. I had wanted to play that loop, but the tech failed me. But Lucy Garcia is interviewed in that it's a podcast. You can access that. Greater LA, Steve Chiatekis, Monday. And Lucy Garcia will, explain why this is both an important issue politically as it is an important issue psychologically. So, Sim, I'm wondering. Let me see if I have my. What are you seeing with other students? For example, at West LA College, where I know that students do have an environmental club that survive the pandemic. How do you communicate with your peers, your classmates, and motivate them?
I'm not really focused so much on like campus organizing because I am like tied to the larger, I guess, youth climate movement in LA and then statewide and then also like nationally. So I don't really have a lot of time for campus organizing. But we've had these conversations before where I think all of us, just students in general, have like a very unique sense of dread when it comes to this situation, and also like a huge amount of responsibility. And we recognize that because we don't really trust the adults in power to do what they said they were going to do. People like politicians and people adults in general have like known about this crisis since the 70s, and they refused to act on it. They created studies that barred us from moving forward with climate legislation, stuff like that. So like, we don't have a lot of trust in our current system of government. We don't have a lot of trust in the politicians that are running it. And a lot of us do feel a huge sense of, I guess, contentment and just, distress with the whole situation. I think, we understand a lot more than we're giving credit sometimes. And so, we are, I think a lot of us are motivated to do something about it. A lot of us just don't know where to start. And, a lot of us are just also just so overwhelmed, which I can't blame a lot of people because they just feel so distressed that they sort of get paralyzed and they can't participate. But yeah.
Well, that is a major point because that's always the risk with, in a sense, being bombarded with too much information is paralysis. It's just the anxiety leads to, I don't want to do anything. Or as one young woman said on the KCRW FM show on Monday, she just wanted to go in her room and eat ice cream the rest of her life, meaning that sometimes we process that overwhelming feeling with just escapism. I just need out of this. But that's a very welcome contribution, Sim. Of course, we're keeping you here for the duration, but I do want to introduce now Dr. Bhutia. She is a director of Life Skills Center and Clinical Training Internship Program. She's also a licensed clinical psychologist and meditation teacher at Los Angeles Harbor College. So if I can get her to, let me see, Dr. Bhutia, maybe my colleagues here can help me get her up on the screen. Let's see, Eugenie. There she is. Voila. And spotlight. Welcome, Dr. Bhutia, to our
here. Let's
panel.
see. Maybe. Give me 1 second. Okay.
We
The line goes.
first learned about you because the Professional Development College actually hosted a workshop that you held at Harbor College on psychology and on student anxiety and so on. So you're particularly well prepared, well versed in this area with all of your different professional practices. So I'm wondering if you can detail to us the things that you run into in your practice, both on campuses and away, that would help attendees recognize or what tools are available for not just for students, but also for faculty and staff to either direct students to those tools or even avail themselves personally. So let us know what it is that you do in the course of your work at Harbor, and what advice you have for your colleagues here.
So, well, actually, we do have an internship program where we bring in doctoral students who are practicing for license, and therefore we provide psychological service and preventive care addressing various topics of mental health related, and as well as life coping skill tools to students. And we also have support group that we provide in various areas, women's group, as well as stress reduction, weekly mindfulness meditation, and other coping skills we teach. And we also have a group for LGBTQ and also interpersonal relationship groups that we teach nonviolence approach and resolving conflicts, not only about interpersonal conflicts, but conflicts within what we're facing now relevant to climate change, how they can be able to have an active role in addressing to the school, community, as well as the society, in nonviolent approach, but also proposing a solution rather than just being helpless and angry and frustrated and all other things that comes with. Now, what do I encounter day to day within our service is an increased amount of anxiety, and an increased amount of anxiety and depression, eating disorder, seasonal affect disorder, and grief and loss, and definitely PTSD. And this is why there's an increase, because climate change is real. And there's several other things that are tied to, as we call it, an increasing factors to increasing stress, and then the impact of stress in triggering mental health issues. And for some might be temporary, but then it has a long lasting impact. Now, people might say, oh, okay, students are students in a classroom, they live at home, but there's several aspects of this climate change that impact student lives. And homelessness, displacement, people who've been exposed to flooding, they move from east to west, and now they are here with no family support system. And it also economy, the cost of living is very expensive for students to have a nutrition meal. Some of them don't even have 3 meals. And seasonal change, it affects mood. It has a lot of impact in allergy, asthma, and other things. There's also a change in the mood. People feel differently when there's a heat wave versus when it is cooler and more relaxed environment. People struggling, as simple as how others are violent toward them. There's a warm temperature, actually, there's been several research done, an increase in temperature actually increase people engaging in assaulting behavior. And so all this has factors influencing how people respond, what we call it day-to-day stress. they
Mhm.
respond differently. And it definitely changed that responsive behavior, reactivity. Now, people sometimes say, oh, okay, then what can we do about it? Well, we have to do a lot of things. We need to stop kind of exposing to this trauma over and over, re-traumatization.
Mm.
Yeah, some of us are adults, and they're still young people. But in therapy, we are forced as a therapist to address all of this. When somebody comes to your office and say, I'm feeling anxiety, I ask students, when was the last time you ate? Oh, yesterday lunch. And this is 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, and there's a lot of biological change when people are really starving, living 1 meal a day. And then in addition to that, even as a psychologist, we are not really, some of us are trained, but not all of us are trained or prepared to address this mass issue. Because it requires us not only individual therapy, because the mental health system is not, the access to mental health is very limited. Okay? Mm-hmm. We're seeing students in campus, one intern is seeing 20 students. And sometimes I have to refer to community resources. So our system also has to change in a way that we are imposing instructors to teach in the classroom, to take breathing technique to reduce anxiety in the classroom, or to sit down with them and listen to them and referring them to resources. So, and we are requesting parents to support their role in having a supportive role, the priest, the community. The current mental health structure is not really prepared. The continuously increasing number of people being impacted by the climate change in terms of psychological, because of all these other factors, displacement, economy, health-related issue, and then homelessness. Now, how do we go from here? Well, as a therapist, I usually go over giving hope, and that hope guiding them what looks like. Increasing empathy, but primarily helping them to be present and acknowledge, and then instead of distress, engage in activity, action-based. They're doing something and connecting them to the group, referring them to a group, and then helping them how they can be able to direct that frustration in non-violent approach, way of communication, demanding others to be supportive of their cause, and then making a difference. Now, any other question you have, I might be able to address.
Well, we'll probably have broader questions when we finished introducing the panel, but I really appreciate your contribution today, because what I recall from the workshop we attended some time ago was that you have a broad view that takes into account all of the other factors that are affecting young people's anxieties, in addition to what we could call the climate environmental fulcrum, because there is economic instability. The polls showing how many of our students are food insecure or homeless, and it's actually quite a large number for the LACCD. Yes. So it's interesting to see that in your practice you do address the constellation of factors that are affecting people's mental well-being, and that you're able to do that so well. So we're fortunate to have you at Harbor College and happy to have you today on this panel. I want to introduce our I won't say final panelist, but that would be Houry Tanashian. She is actually a registered nurse, and her practice is at LA Pierce College. So Houry, feel free to introduce what it is you do in that capacity, which, as we can all see, is not the same as our licensed clinical social workers or our practicing psychologists. And are you in child development? Is that
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Houry Tanashian. I'm the director of the Student Health Center over Pierce College. And I help run the health center, and I also see many students in crises. I do crisis management. So I would like to present what are resources here at the Pierce College. I would like to share a couple slides I made. Just a second. I'm sorry, just a second. This one. Okay. Are we able to see?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So Pierce Student Health Center, besides providing medical care, we also are very big on mental health. And just like all of you mentioned, mental health is very, very important on so many aspects. For us here at the health center, we like to work hand in hand with all the faculty and staff, because sometimes the faculty are the one who observes the students in the classroom, who get to know the students maybe better than us, and you guys get to see their emotional ups and downs. So what is mental health? It's in one sentence, it is how we think, how we feel, how we act, and how we handle stress, how we relate to others. And all of this is very well observed in a classroom setting. And mental health is very important in all stages of life. And recent research has shown that children who had experienced adverse effects early in their childhood, they are more at risk to be having continued mental health problems and also health issues. And we all know that we have a little cold and we're not feeling well. That affects how we focus on things. That affects how we relate to others. I mean, that's a minor thing. Imagine if that person is experiencing a heavier load of mental health problems, or vice versa. Maybe they're having health issues and that's affecting their mental health problems. So in our center, we have two licensed psychologists who see students every day. I am here every day and I intervene with crisis management because sometimes our appointments are booked. So I do crisis interventions, and we sometimes have to ask for outside help if the person is severely troubled. For example, if they're suicidal or homicidal. So we assess all those risks at the health center, and we'll see if this student can safely leave and can safely find the resources given, or they need additional help. They cannot do it on that day. So we do see walk-ins. Appointments are preferred for our stable students who follow up with our counselors to see with their weekly sessions. We provide 6 sessions per semester, and that's included in their health fee. We also do group therapy, and that's outside of the 6 sessions. If the students get together, let's say a depression group, an anxiety group, we see all of those in a group sessions. So we highly urge our faculty to maybe, if you feel something on a student in your classroom, encourage them to come to the health center. We also highly urge faculty, if your student is in distress, walk them over, because if a person is in distress, sometimes, you know, they will not be able to bring themselves to the health center. They need that extra support for someone to bring them to the health center. And also remind the students that it is completely confidential. I am getting feedback from the students that, is this going to affect my grade? Is this going to affect how my faculty feels about me, or even finding a job? This is completely confidential. It does not cross over to the academic side. So our role is here to support the student in their academic success and in their life. Ultimately, we want them to graduate and go on to be living full, successful lives. So I tell the students, and as faculty, you will also tell the students, call for an appointment. If you feel you need to speak to someone right now, just walk over to the health center. We are open every day from 9 to 7. And we also teach students to see if a friend is going through something, encourage them, bring your friend over. And also a couple of things I'd like to share here. There is a couple numbers, I have it on the slide here, 988, and 988 is the equivalent of 911. So I've been telling faculty and students, anybody who is in distress, anybody who is suicidal, anybody that's at home or in a place where they don't feel safe and they are having mental health crises, to call that line. That 988 number is a national line. It's not a Pierce line, and somebody will pick up the phone just like 911, and they will do crisis management and also send help. Let's say the person is suicidal, they will send LAPD out to assess, to do a wellness check. The text number 741-741, anybody can use that number, and you can use that number, for example, if the person is in a place where they cannot speak or make any noise, they can call that number for any sort of mental health support. For medical support, we'll call 911. However, these two lines are for mental health support. I also tell my students and faculty, because I'm also an emergency room nurse, and currently I work on the weekends at a local emergency room here in the Valley. Anybody who is having any mental health distress, any sort of hearing voices, suicidal, assaulted, or anything, students and basically anybody can walk into a nearest emergency room, and they can get assessed for mental health issues, and they can get the help they need. And I also insist on the person does not need to have insurance to go to a hospital. It's the law that the hospitals and the emergency rooms are required to see the person and assess them for that initial need without an insurance. This is the 988 Suicides and Crises Lifeline. If you like, I can put this in the chat and maybe we can share. Any questions I can help answer?
Well, Houry, I'm so glad that we have you on this panel, because what I was hoping from both you and Elmida was that you would have a very rich amount of resources to share with everybody that are, I want to call it nuts and bolts, the things that we can actually physically do to avail ourselves of the help that we might need, and of course that students will want to avail themselves. Both of you have actually addressed the issue of the great demand for practicing psychotherapists and professionals in mental health that might be so great right now that it's hard to find enough staff to respond to it. So I'll later have a broad question on the issue of where we are with meeting that demand, obviously in different contexts, depending on whether we're at the LAUSD schools or the community college district. With that, there is a proposal, I think, on our agenda that we could take a short break. I want Beth, maybe my colleague Beth Abels, to weigh in and suggest she had tentatively a bio break at this hour exactly. And then when we reconvene, it would be all the panelists on the screen, on the spotlight, and the questions would be generally aimed at all the panelists, and then any one of you could, or several of you could address them. So Beth, if that's okay, do you think we can do a short little bio break?
Yeah, let's just take 5 minutes and be back at 12:06.
At 12:06.
Yep.
Okay, well, much appreciated. We will do that. I will put a pause on the There we go. Continuing the recording now. It did 12:05. So there's our 5-minute break. Hopefully people got enough time to grab some coconut water. That's what I did. And let me then make spotlights on, so we should have spotlights on our panelists. And let's see, add spotlight to Houry and who else? Sim. On this does it. We go ask to.
Yep, we need our speaker, our panelists to open their cameras so we can spotlight them.
Beth, I'm wondering, is there a limit to how many people I can spotlight? Oh, good. There's Sim. Okay. I was wondering because I kept trying to click on the right place. Let's see. Missing here, we have Houry. Well, Elmida could only stay till 11:40. So I think Elmida Baghdaserian has another commitment that she had to attend. So that has our 4 panelists, Dr. Bhutia, Eugenie Lewis, Houry Tanashian, Sim Bilal, and we now have a series of questions which are sort of general, so that they're not particularly, in other words, feel free to unmute yourself and address any of these general questions. And an article that we shared at the beginning warns young people to ignore the doomsayers and to throw themselves joyfully into the task at hand. What can we older people do to validate their opinions and encourage activism that is good for the soul and the planet? Bit poetic there with my question. Feel free to unmute yourself and address that issue of validating opinions of young people and giving them a sense of belonging and purpose and joy in the task at hand. Oh, don't be shy.
I guess, you know, maybe Sim and I come from different generations, but I think we're both, well, he's been a climate activist perhaps a little bit longer than I have. But I do think that there's a lot of meaning to be had in addressing the climate crisis, and we have a lot of solutions available to us. And I think we need to help young people feel prepared to address them, and by first of all acknowledging them in school, which I think, you know, we have a long way to go to acknowledge the climate crisis, even in school, you know. But I think that there is a lot of meaning to careers that could address climate issues, and I guess that's kind of my mission, is to try to elevate, you know, the career possibilities with young people and be able to engage in discussions around that. But I'm really happy that Sim was here, and you know, the voice of, we have so many, we have different generational perspectives, but it, you know, and I really empathize with the point of view that, you know, we as adults need to do more. And I don't think it's young people's total responsibility to address the climate crisis. I think it's our responsibility too. I think it's all generations. And I think we need to get more people involved, and we need to have more discussions in all forms of life. So we're not just having a few people struggling on this issue. Anyway, those are just some thoughts I have. Sam, I'd like to hear from you about your perspective.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add, you know, the struggle is intergenerational, and I have an immense amount of respect for, you know, boomers. You guys really did like walk so we could run, and like, you know, the reason why Gen Z is like so active so much earlier and so passionate is because, you know, we're following in your footsteps, the same, you know, the road that you paved when we were younger. And so, you know, I found that, you know, having allies with older people and, you know, the boomer generation, and not only legitimizes us as, you know, Zoomers, but it also like it levels the playing field, because we are going up against, you know, adults, many of which are in your own generation. And, you know, they talk down to us, they try to delegitimize us. And, you know, they're just saying, you're just a bunch of kids, you don't know what you're talking about. Why should I listen to you? And, you know, what I found is like when, you know, boomers stand up and, they say like, we're on your side, we support you. You guys, you add credit to our argument, you make us stronger. And, I know a lot of older people feel an immense amount of guilt sometimes, especially when I talk to them about, the situation that we're in, and they just feel like, really helpless and just a huge amount of guilt and sometimes shame. But, I'm never in the boat where, I'm going to be ageist or say, you guys had your time, let us lead. And like, I think, we should be leading this movement because we are young people. We're going to face the most severe consequences. But the thing is, we're not going to win unless you guys are right there with us. And so, I would encourage all the older boomers to, come out and support your local youth climate activists.
That is one of the best political insights I have heard in a long time. We're more typically used to hearing, that the tension between what my generation brought as a legacy for your generation. That tension sometimes gets displayed or analyzed in ways that are not functional or not conducive to solutions. And yet, Sim, you've just pointed out how important it is to make this an intergenerational struggle, to validate each other, and particularly not to dismiss younger people who are, visibly upset by a lot of what they're experiencing. And I think that's one of the key issues we wanted to bring up in this seminar, was the importance of validating youth experience. It is, in a sense, closer to reality than my generation, which we had a lot of luxuries. I could say I don't remember. I remember when I first heard about the climate crisis. I grew up in Mexico City. I was in grade school, but it was just brought up as the greenhouse effect, and that was that. It took 20 years later to be in college to realize, oh, that's what the greenhouse effect is. Anybody want to contribute to Sim's contribution there? I think it's a good takeoff point for commentary, insights.
I think your question was about elevating the voice of youth, and I think actually in preparing for this presentation and in this seminar, I mean, I think thinking about actually just the statistics of the emotional impact that this has had on youth, I think that needs to be elevated. These I guess, do we hear about that enough? Like the sadness and the fear of young people and about their future, and being able to have like a sense of what their future can look like. And I think if we could expand on that, this is a great launching point with this presentation, I think, of conveying those feelings.
Well, we know that there's high demand for psychotherapy today. Apparently, a lot of practicing psychotherapists are booked, and it does raise issues about ability to respond, should we call it institutionally or professionally. I'm wondering how many of you might have an insight into what is the, I don't know, maybe the waiting time between when someone can, it was very nice to see Houry's presentation, very well spelled out as to what different layers are of response, so that if something is in fact an emergency, you don't wait 2 months for the appointment, and there's a system in place for that. And that was very, very useful, Houry. But I'm wondering, as people make decisions of what to do with their college degrees, would you have any kind of advice for younger people to choose the professional path that all of you or on the panel seem to have chosen, and that is to practice psychology for the betterment of society and for the survivability of individuals?
George, I'd like to answer that.
Mm-hmm.
So from my experience, I orient many new oncoming nurses, new graduates at Tarzana Hospital, and I hear both sides. Some of them say psychology because it's in high demand right now. It's a very, very high paying job. And then there are others who want to do it for the betterment of society. So I instruct them, I tell them, you have to think really hard, because ultimately you have to really care about what you do. And at some point, no matter how much money you get paid, if you don't care about what you do, you're not going to do a good job at it. And it is a high demand job right now, but the person needs really to care about the goal of their mission.
It's something we used to call that vocational, a calling.
Yeah, a calling.
Lucy Garcia has her hand up. Lucy Garcia, a colleague of ours and a great partner in our climate curriculum project at LAUSD. Lucy, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the panel any question you might have.
So I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I think that it's, I have one comment first about the idea of not, like not honoring the younger people. It's so crazy wrong, because biology, gives us younger generations for a reason. Things are changing. People need to look at it a new way, right? And so that's one thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is one of the key things that happens to young people in the course of their interaction with many adults is school. And if you don't talk about climate in school, and if you don't let kids use all the resources that we have developed over these thousands of years for dealing with societies and emotions and history and all of our wonderful disciplines that we have, if you're not helping them use that towards climate crises, then you're kind of not doing the whole job as a teacher, right? You have to find ways, and there's so many ways. And the third point that I wanted to make, I don't know how many other young people are on this call, but right now there is a moment because the LAUSD has passed a climate literacy resolution, and it has called for presentations to help train the climate literacy champions. Right now, there's 245 teachers, each at a different school. Climate literacy champions they're called, and they need help. They need to be told what to teach. So right now, there's a chance to do that. If you're interested, I'm going to drop my email in the chat. Thank you so much. This has been so interesting.
Really good to have you present today, because you do have some traction with this as well. And that's very good advice. Because one of the things that we deal with in that climate curriculum committee, of which the Sustainable Environment Institute is a happy member now for 2 years, is the need to bring climate education outside of the sort of STEM silo, they call it, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. How can we bring climate education to social sciences and humanities? I realized that our panel are practicing psychologists and student activists, and that might not be something that you've had to deal with, but you might have advice for those. For example, I teach environmental science, and I have to confess it's something that worries me. Like the next week we'll be dealing with the atmosphere, and the week after that we're dealing with the climate crisis, and none of the news is good news. Our textbook makes a feeble effort to provide something optimistic in each chapter, but it's generally gloom and doom. And all the trends are, we've been wrong. We were too conservative in our models. In fact, the models show us that a lot of the things we thought would happen in 20 years are happening in 5. And we just keep having to deliver this endless stream of basically science and fact-based information, at the same time fearing that we're contributing inadvertently to a sense of alienation and hopelessness. Maybe the solution is by resorting to the humanities and the social sciences. So what, in your experience, and I think we do have somebody, Fatima Balwina, has a suggestion in the chat about social entrepreneurship. So how can we move climate outside of the STEM silo when it comes to education? I think Dr. Bhutia, you just unmuted yourself. You have maybe Eugenie or
Yes,
Dr.
I was
Bhutia.
just going to add a little bit off to the previous conversation, which is about validating the young people whose life is concerned about, and then they are in the front fighting the cause for climate change, as one way would be listening. I think one of the greatest tools about connecting with others and finding a solution is empathic listening. And if we can be able to extend that, not only that we validate how they feel and about at here and now in terms of their emotional aspect and their well-being, but also about the future, then we can be able to provide them our insight of previous struggle and previous accomplishment, how they can be able to tailor their demand or strategy toward achieving their goal, and which is also part of our goal. And then the second part would be, how do we be able to recruit? I usually say it as a recruitment of more psychologists. I really use the therapy as part of an approach for people to not only to address the crisis, but also as a process of personal development, transformation stuff. So I usually introduce to those who seems to, their problem is kind of tangled with the issue about environmental concern or eco-anxiety and about the future. I always present them that using this experience as a means to have advocacy role, not only in psychology, but in psychology, writing, teaching, and as well as also becoming a therapist, a different type of therapist, because the current system only focus on individuals and maybe a group. But what we are going to be facing the next, I don't know, 20 something, 20, I don't know, 50, or even before that, the way we're going will be, we need something community-based psychotherapy that will integrate everyone in order to address not only few, but a mass, because the psychological impact of environmental change is going to be increasing and touching many lives, in particular, those who have no access. So, and that's how I kind of preach or pitch to people, you know, my profession and people considering my profession as a means to bring wholeness to individual and community and society.
I fully I endorse what you're saying, that we need to take a population approach to mental health, because I don't know, I mean, we need more, you know, mental health professionals, and I think hopefully there's some efforts legislatively to address that, but I think there's just, we need to look at this from a community public health standpoint, because this is not just individual problems, these are population problems. And
very good point. Fatima Balduila has her hand up, so she's had her hand up for a while. Let me move to her and let her address whatever she would like to contribute. Fatima, yeah.
Hi everyone. Fatima Baldiwala, adjunct to Valley College. I teach composition. I also teach a non-credit entrepreneurship class, but I mostly teach composition, English 101, English 102, English 103. And I see that you all have created wonderful curriculum, like amazing. I really love it. There's a book list, there are articles. I can take all those articles and book lists and create an English 101 or a 103 class, or even a 102 class on it. 102 is literature. But I mean, it's a lot of work to go about creating that class. I'm happy to do it, but I mean, does SEI have any kind of incentive being offered to instructors? That's my question. Does SEI have any incentive offered to instructors to create this class? That's one. My second question is, do you have any conversations with department chairs saying, oh, we really want this class offered? Is there anyone in your division who would be willing to offer this class? And we are willing to work with that faculty member. Because otherwise, how are you going to get the word out? You need to have teachers who are willing to do this, and you need to have like conversations with department chairs, like my English department chair saying, oh, this is a topic that we want to make sure that our students get it. Would you offer such a class in your division?
Mhm.
So would SEI do that? I mean, would they have that conversation?
Well, it's a good question you're asking there, because we have been very keen on expanding our, you could call it our mission, since we've had Beth Abels and Zhao Bellenhorf join the staff. And so that now we have more time to dedicate to this. And Beth Abels has been working on something called a community of practice, which involves reaching out to faculty and creating a kind of community where this exact thing can be addressed, whether it's course curriculum or networking, or sharing resources that are across the district and even outside our district to other community colleges. So it's something that we're this year happy to finally be able to go beyond our website and our Facebook page, but we do have our website is actually quite rich in terms of.
I know it is. I checked it out. And it's wonderful. I mean, I love the resources that you all have gathered, but what I see is I don't see, I mean, I checked it out because I was curious, but I don't see the link between how, so you have this treasure chest of resources, but I don't see it being utilized. And to me, that's a sad thing. We need to spread the word. We need to have these resources utilized. So I want to know what SEI is doing to utilize, make sure that it's more people know about these resources and are actually using it.
So I would love to have that conversation. I think that's an important conversation to have. Beth Abels here, sorry to interrupt. I would like us to get a chance to hear from our panelists who are not on the SEI steering committee. They're here to talk about specifically climate anxiety and such. And I'm happy to address those questions with you separately or towards the end, but I would like us to help focus this conversation about what the expertise here in this particular panel can help us with.
Yes, of course. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. No, all good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No.
Thank you, Fatima. Doris Kaufman has her hand up. Doris Kaufman, you might need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? Yeah?
Yes.
Thank you. You know, George, before we leave this moment about expanding outside of the STEM curriculum, are there any current courses anywhere in the California community college system that would be called like environmental health or health? For example, I teach health in the LACCD system at more than one college, and I'm always pushed to try to figure out how to include environmental health in this already full curriculum, but establishing it outside of STEM, in other words, for example, the kinesiology departments, wouldn't that have to go through curriculum committee?
Oh, those questions are big and complicated. I'm not sure that we can address them and basically tease our panel with having to hear about our bureaucracy, but you can be sure that it's not as easy as it should be. There's always a big challenge for community colleges to get courses approved, unlike the four-year institutions, which have a lot more freedom when it comes to upper division courses and the like. But that's a really good question, and we're keeping track of everything that's being suggested here that we can deal with outside of our immediate panel, which is to deal with this incredible challenge before us. And something that did come up a little earlier, and I was so happy to hear, I think it was Dr. Bhutia and both Eugenie mentioned this, and that is that for the longest time, psychotherapy and psychology really have been excessively focused on the individual's personal crises, the individual's tools and abilities, and overcoming anxiety and getting the tools to do that. In fact, psychotherapy or psychiatry is relied a whole lot on a pharmacopoeia of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and a whole panoply of drugs that are used to treat people's mental health crises. Yet we're living at a time when individuating this is really, it begs the question as to whether it, well, to put it bluntly, are we trying to make people who are reasonably experiencing quite a degree of grief and anxiety to be socially well adjusted to what I call an impossible world? In other words, and I think you have actually addressed that, Dr. Bhutia and Eugenie, you've addressed that that we need what you called it, kind of a group therapy or community-based psychotherapy, or something that goes beyond the crisis of the individual to look at those stimulus, those contexts, which can at times drive the problem, but which also beg the question, is the practice counterproductive? Are we helping people adapt to something that they don't want to adapt to? So I know it's a weird curveball of a question, but how can we move into that more? Well, I'll give you an illustration. I have a nephew who's a millennial, and way back in 2016, he started drifting toward things like QAnon, and a lot of it was social media. And so I've had long conversations with his father. They did attempt psychotherapy. It didn't work. And one of the things that they learned from the psychotherapist was, it's one thing to treat my patient who's delusional, meaning that has ideas about reality that aren't real, and which is not the same thing as psychosis. It's just a lot of people are delusional. But what do you do when it's social? When it's in fact collective, when it comes through Facebook and Instagram, and it's no longer your individual patient's delusional world, it's now something that's being reinforced, even constructed by factors outside the individual. How do we deal with, in a sense, social delusions when it comes to anxieties and, in a sense, the capture of a lot of young people by these rather reckless psychological wrecking balls like QAnon? Eugenie's smiling.
Wow, that's a question, George. I mean, I don't know if I could address the social delusion aspect of it, but I do think, I mean, we are kind of ripe for, like, in the climate movement for extremism. I have a colleague who talks about how, with the fear that's associated with climate change, that can develop extremism and even support alt-right points of view, because people feel like the world's going to end and we have to kind of take care of ourselves, and it gets into very extreme thoughts. But I'm a social worker, and social workers tend to think of people in the environment, and I think a lot of times we individualize problems into individuals, but they're really societal problems, and I think that stigmatizes people and actually prevents them from getting help, because we say, oh, like there's something wrong with me. And, in the trauma-informed world, we say it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. And these are things that are happening all around the world, and we can't ignore them. A lot of mental health is now existential, I think. It's people worried about, I don't know, all the things, the politics, the war, anyway, those are my thoughts.
I think maybe I can add to your comment, is that no matter which side we are, perception is reality. So our definition of delusion to those who are on that extreme aspect of held belief, there's a need to acknowledge the delusion, because that is caused by several factors. The same way that we, or some of us, have fear of what will happen because of climate change. And there is another factor for them to go to that extreme, to hold on this view or held assumption about the world we live in and what should be the solution. So I think maybe acknowledging those factors and then working together to maybe to work with how they respond to their fear, perceived fear, versus then polarizing them as a fringe or a certain group of people outside from the mainstream. That is kind of more of what we normally respond. We need to change how we respond. I think there is a time. I really echo, Eugene, that there's the time. Our time is we need to respond differently to all the things that's arising. And one was the sense of openness, a sense of urgency, and then listening to one another empathically and finding a ground where we all work together to address the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than polarizing and then, I guess, we're not going to get anywhere.
Well, that's a very good insight, because one of the things I had to do for this event was to do a lot of research, since it's not something I know a lot about. And I, really curated those articles that we're sharing from a vast list of what I think is really good journalism. And, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, it's the PBS NewsHour, they've all really paying attention to this. One of the things that came up is, how do you deal with your deluded QAnon young person? I think, Dr. Bhutia, you just brought up what is very central to a lot of what I've been reading about that. They do talk about empathy over rejection. And it made me shudder, because I realized that in my relationship with my nephew, it's been more rejection than empathy. And because I was so shocked when he told me with a straight face that Hillary Clinton eats babies, and thought, wow, Matthew. It really did bring about the wrong response on my part, as far as being able to maintain lines open, links intact, so that we could continue our conversations. But we don't now, because he's, from my point of view, he's too far gone. But that's the dark side. I wish Matthew had actually picked up on Extinction Rebellion, climate action, something constructive and healthful, and not, be stuck in social media. Is social media helpful or actually an obstacle? And I'm sure any one of you might have an insight into that. Is social media helping us with this, or is it actually contributing to the problem? Yeah, Sim.
I definitely think it's helpful. I understand, there are definitely harms to it, and there is a huge amount of misinformation, like coming down the alt-right pipeline. And, I think I have a lot of sympathy, I guess, for people that do fall down this sort of rabbit hole. It's not because I feel like, any member of our generation holds like malicious contempt or ideas. There is a huge amount of brainwashing, and they make it like so just like like I don't want to say delicious, but I don't know another word. But like it's just like it just engulfs you, and it takes you over. And so when you're frustrated with society and just the way things are, it's easy, I think, to fall down these really alt-right pipelines. But we can't solely blame social media for it, and we can't just blame individuals for it as well. Like this is a root issue with our society, and it is frightening and disgusting, but it is just scratching at the surface of what is like harboring, I guess, on feelings like of a lot of young people, and especially young men. I think it is quite unfortunate. Like I've noticed, I'm one of the only younger men inside of like climate activists and just like climate activism in general. Like they did a study, like climate activists are overwhelmingly, in America anyway, they're overwhelmingly younger white people, and specifically women. And so there is something that is turning off younger men to climate activism in general, but just like a lot of social justice, which is a problem, and it's something we need to address. And I'm afraid I don't have the answers to that, but I do believe that social media is a tool that Gen Z uses to organize, and we're very, very effective at doing that. There's just so many different Gen Z focused orgs that we build a lot of power on social media, and that's the way that we communicate and build power. Do I think it should be, regulated? Absolutely. Like, we can't allow false information, misinformation to be spread on platforms that are, have access to millions of people. But that's just my perspective.
That's a very good perspective. Very good point as well, because I was doing an either or, and you're pointing that it's both and. Right? It's both our enemy and our friend. I'm curious about one thing, Sim, though, that people my generation, are still on Facebook. I'm surprised we're not on MySpace, and Twitter. And but for Gen Z, is now that Elon Musk has bought Twitter with all of the portentous possibilities that might happen there, is that a platform that younger people use, or how do you communicate with each other and convey the positive things you're doing and on a different wavelength than Twitter and Facebook?
Yeah, I definitely never been on Facebook. Instagram is sometimes useful. We do still use a lot of Twitter. I think it's just like it's so much like simpler just to write a quick little message, and then easily like millions of people can see it. So that part is really useful. But then also, TikTok is really taking off, and it's almost as effective as Twitter. It's just sometimes you can fall down like really niche rabbit holes on TikTok, and it's really hard to get out of. It's the same thing. Like right-wing ism and just fascism has taken off on these platforms, and they should be regulated. Like, there is no reason why we should be celebrating Nazis or white supremacists in the 21st century. Like, it has no place. And so I've been trying to check people a little bit more on TikTok, but it is really toxic when you fall down those rabbit holes, and then the racism comes out. But it is what it is.
Good point. Good point. So yes, my colleague Beth Abels is very keen on TikTok, and we're trying to get away from our outdated platforms at the SEI, which you can see as websites and Facebook pages. So we're hoping to have maybe student interns that can help us use the social media platforms to spread our message in a way that's appropriate and familiar to people that are half our age. There is something that's been on my mind. I tried to phrase it as a question. Beth and I worked on this question yesterday, because when I originally wrote the question, it came out all wrong. So Beth pointed out, she said, well, maybe what I wanted to bring up was somebody I'm very impressed by and inspired by is the very young Swedish young teenager, Greta Thunberg. And she has been trolled on the internet to no end. They're even made, there's a great British comedy show that's kind of puppets, and they have taken after Greta in ways that are they just depict her as this angry brat. And I'm thinking, when I hear her speak, her anger is righteous. And there's such a thing as righteous anger that maybe older people can't hear. But there's also something about Greta that is, compelling, and that is that she's in that category of vulnerable people we call, neurodiverse, and so that she's not your typical 16 or 17-year-old, and in many ways, it actually is from her own reckoning. It's something that's driven her, is the spectrum that she's on, and that allows her in some ways, and also obligates her to be very one-pointed, very focused. So what I didn't know is how to bring this up as a question, because she's uniquely vulnerable, both as a young woman and as a neurodiverse person, and as an outspoken critic of business as usual. She's weighed in very critically on COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, which is promising to be a rerun of COP26 in Glasgow, where everybody goes and everybody says everything and they do nothing. So we can always quote Greta saying it's blah, blah, blah. And then all of the, they show up, the cameo, there's the photo. I don't know if Joe Biden even dropped in. And what we're seeing is the COP process of dealing with the climate crisis on the earth, and pushing member states and attendees to meet the commitments they're making at these COP conferences. So it's it adds a layer of frustration for those of us that have put a lot of faith maybe in what we used to call multilateralism, that you could get all the countries of the world together in a big room and get them all to, to crunch heads and to come up with a path to solutions to major problems facing us. And I think maybe the COP system, the International Panel on Climate Change, has proven to be less effective than we had hoped for way back when we had the Kyoto Accords, if you remember those. So I'm curious. Oh, there is a hand up. So Doris Kaufman has her hand up. Maybe she wants to address this, or any of you on the panel want to address this issue of how is Greta right? Is the COP process not a good idea for confronting the climate crisis?
If
Go
I
ahead,
could-
Doris.
Hi, thank
Yes.
you. That just kind of fits with a question I was going to ask Sim. If I could just localize it for a moment, that overarching question you have about what one young person is thinking in a leadership position at the international level. Here we are in Los Angeles County, and we're at a county level, but across more than one school system. Sim, this meeting right now, if there's one thing that you would like to have come out of this meeting for us, that you want us to do or think, could you tell us what it is?
Yeah. I came here today with, the expectation of, talking to some of the most influential people when it comes to younger people. You guys are educators, you're talking with and engaging with young people every single day. And I think, you have a unique, you have a unique obligation, because you have a sense of, authority over us as Gen Z. You are our educators, you are our nurses. We listen to you when you talk, and we believe what you say is true. And so I think, it does come on you to, firmly and strongly communicate, like, this is an issue, and this is something that we can fight, and this is something that needs to be worked on. And, I think also, so I just did a lot of work with the election, and I was on my first campaign, which we just won. And, for me, I did a lot of the grassroots organizing. I banged on the door on the outside for over 5 years trying to get action. And I realized I did more damage on the inside than I ever did on the outside. And so I've been doing a lot of work around legislating and just that. And I've had a lot of influence. Just because I think for so long people have tried to keep me out of their sort of legislative circles. They don't want me there. And so the minute I got in, it's an issue. And so I would really strongly, urge you to get young people within your classes to organize around this. Either, not everyone has capacity to be a climate activist or climate organizer, but you can, instill the seed in them that this is an issue that we can win and that we need people to work on and fight, and it's within their capacity. And so I think, there's maybe 20 educators on this call. Maybe you have 20 students in your classroom. That's a huge number of young people that you can reach and communicate this to. So I think, my biggest thing is making sure that, young people are showing up and elections, that they understand they have power with their voice, that, as educators, you are standing beside them, and that there's a whole universe of, strong organizers waiting, to welcome them in. And so, I think that would be my biggest ask, is to inspire the young people in your class and ask them to show up in this movement.
Do you have a website?
Yeah, kind of. So I do a lot of things, and sometimes I have a website, sometimes I don't. But I'll put it in the chat. So right now I'm organizing with Youth Climate Strike LA. I think Lucy put that. Oh, Beth put it inside the chat, so that you can reach me on Twitter there. I also have a PAC, so I have that website up, but we can't receive funding just yet. But that's a good way to reach me. And then I'm also organizing with California Green New Deal, which we do have a website for that one, but I don't remember. It's CAGND. Okay, I don't remember our website for that one, but yeah.
No problem, that's findable. Thank you.
Thank you.
And George, may I say something about
the
question you posed? when I see her or when I hear about her and all the articles critics and or supporters talk or wrote about her, that I see there's something that is very clear that she come across or she lives her reality at here and now, which is there's a sense of self-acceptance in public of whether it is some kind of limitation. And then in doing that, she has found self-empathy, not only to address the current, how she lived her life to its fullest, but also she has an empathy for others, how it feels, other people experiencing sadness, all other mental health issue. And now some people say, oh, okay, how far a person can go. But then she faced the current moment and living her life to its fullest capacity, and then also addressing the future, that the challenge that come, that she'll be facing as she grows, older, career, marriage, where she lives, all that. And instead of taking or feeling helplessness, she actually, it's a choice to be an agent of change, and taking that role to engage, not only to live her life fully without any limitation, but also to inspire and challenge others. I think that is really a kind of a bold statement, and also that gives us an opportunity to witness that how it is possible to transcend one physical, psychological, or any limitation one encounters in life, whether it's developmental or post or as an adult, whatever happens to that change in the way we function or impose limitation on us. And that by itself challenge all of us what to do with her. Either we support her or we criticize her, because we hear also criticism that she magnifies or she echoes this underlying current of fear and anxiety among young people about the future.
Yeah. Well, she's an inspiration. That I loved her little trip across the ocean on a sailboat. There's a lot of things Greta does that I find just really endearing to her as a person. And she's written a book. It's coming out in the spring, and you can buy it on Amazon. It'll be delivered when it's out. But she is pulling back from a lot of her activism and wants to focus a whole lot more on things in a sense closer to home and in her own education. But she has also promoted a young woman, I think from Kenya or Uganda, who's actually, in a sense, filling Greta's shoes internationally as a voice of youth on climate, and particularly important because she comes from the African continent, and it adds to or addresses the lack of diversity that Sim was talking about when it comes to climate activism. So that's now there is a cosmic question from Lucy Garcia. Well, you see what I mean when I say it's a cosmic question. She brings up the history, the legacy, what we could even refer to as the ball and chain around our foot, when it comes to dealing with a society that has such a, well, for lack of a better word, dark history when it comes to the expropriation and genocide of the native population, when it comes to the enslavement of people from the African continent, when it comes to the deep divisions in society based on ethnicity, on religion, on, of course, class. And in a way, I guess the question is cosmic to the extent that given that those limitations, that legacy, that ball and chain, how can we move forward knowing that these are serious limitations in American society? It is a cosmic question, but Lucy's asking, and I thought I would relay her question. We have like 5 more minutes. It's the short
Okay,
one.
I'm going to just say this really quick. let's see. So her question starts out, what are the connections between? I'm just going to say many. One word, many. And it requires us now to look at them one by one, 2 by 2, 6 by 6. We need to look at them, reevaluate what we understand, and this is on an individual level, and move forward. Sim, can I ask you one other question here? When you look at California, if you were going to pick one climate change, quote unquote, concept that you believe that young people, A, are most attracted to for its importance, or B, you see as politically a place where we can make the next change that would be useful, what would it be?
Okay, biggest for me is, we need to move past oil and fossil fuel extraction. In California, we have the largest urban oil field in our own county. So Los Angeles County is the world's largest urban oil field. We see like the discrepancies, like, I've always said, you can't talk about climate change unless you're addressing climate justice, and that's a part of your discussion. You need to talk about the racist history, the racial inequality. You need to talk about capitalism. You need to talk about how they intersect and why, things are in the situation we are in now. So like, young people are suffering from all these issues, and it's creating an epidemic in our health because, we're all stressed out about all of the stuff that's happening, and we never really took time to address it or heal from it as a nation or as a country. So in California, I'm fighting legislation right now to, we passed something that would, it's called it's called setbacks. So basically it requires oil and gas facilities to be like more than 3,200 feet from like sacrifice zones. So they call sacrifice zones schools that are in communities of color where they have oil drilling, or homes that are near these facilities. They call it sacrifice zones. And the fossil fuel industry is trying to kill that legislation. But also, I'm trying to block them from killing that legislation, but then also just phase out oil and gas all across California. And then in addition to that, California takes majority. We're one of the largest purchasers of Amazonian oil. And so, I'm also trying to help the Amazon with their 80 by 25. So protecting 80% of the Amazon by 2025. So that's something I'm working on. We need a lot of support on that too. And then in 2023, we're going to run a bill that we ran last year that basically would require the state of California to divest from the fossil fuel industry as far as like pensions, right? So CalPERS and CalSTRS, which are our state pension funds, are like invested in the fossil fuel industry. And so we just have like a lot of campaigns that we're working on that really center young people. Gen Z wrote the bill that ran last year, and that was the farthest it had gotten as far as like divestment bill. And so those are just, it's a lot. I can't mention it all right now, but these are just things we're working on. But yeah.
So actually, and the first you mentioned is the distancing production facilities and exploration and facilities, drilling and so forth away from schools, or the reverse, moving the schools away from those areas. Now, there's two sides to that argument, right? But the point is that's a local focus. Is that through the Green New Deal for you, or is this the LA strike?
So I've mostly been focusing on the city level, but we made some historic wins on the city level this past year where we got the city council to basically commit to phasing out oil drilling by 2025. Right now, I'm focused on trying to like expand it on the county level. And so that's one of my focuses right now, and really just trying to make sure there is equity in our resolution that we introduce, and whatever future legislation there is.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that comment and your questions, Lucy. We're actually running out of time, but I think this last question that Sam fielded really reveals an incredible knowledge on environmental problems in California that touch on all these different organizations of which you're a member. So I'm particularly pleased with your participation and contribution today. I think it really made for a very rich panel and insights. As some of you know, the first Gen Z person was elected to Congress this last election, 25-year-old from Florida. So Gen Z has a seat in the Congress. And that's my way of saying, Sim, if you're ever considering running for office, I would be very happy to work on your campaign because your knowledge of legislation, your knowledge is huge. And yeah, if you're seriously, if you're thinking of running for office, doesn't matter which one, count on a lot of support. Sim for Congress. Okay, well, folks, thank you very much for a very successful 2-hour panel today. And I think we've learned a lot, and particularly on the resources that are used, on the optics we should have, and on the need to be empathetic and have solidarity with each other if we're ever going to really make significant change. So thank you to all of the participants, Eugenie Lewis, Dr. Bhutia, of course, Bilal, Houry Tanashian, and Elmida Baghdaserian. So maybe we'll even have a workshop or a seminar on divestment. We've considered it. So thank you for bringing up the CalSTRS and CalPERS issue. With that, friends, I will stop the recording and we'll post it when it's available.